Okay, so we finished part 1 of the lecture on memory with information processing model and Shiffrin multimodal storage. We finished part 2 on logical and illogical thinking, and now we're on to the final unit, language. So we're going to talk about how we acquire language, as well as what are the parts of language, not just in English, but in all languages psychologically. Okay, so first we need to define what language is. Languages are spoken, written, or gestured works and the way that we combine them to communicate meaning. So it doesn't just have to be verbal, it can be non-verbal, whether you're talking about facial expressions or whether you're talking about American Sign Language. And here, I forgot I had put this video of this woman who's doing American Sign Language at a rap concert. And so with ASL, it's not just the interpreting the movements of the hands, like my name is Jackie. It would also have to be your facial expression. So the emotions that are in whatever lyrics or whatever words are being spoken are also a part of American Sign Language, which is what makes the coronavirus so difficult for people in the deaf community, because a lot of their communication is hindered by the use of masks, not just reading lips, but the actual emotion behind it as well. Because think about it, if you're texting somebody and they text you K, you don't know what the tone behind that is. That could be an angry K. That could be a leave me alone K. That could just be a simple, okay, I'm just acknowledging your text. That's all. Okay, so our tone and our gestures can help us interpret the meaning behind the words that is spoken or written. Okay, now in the spoken language, okay, a phoneme, and I think phone as in sound, like phonetic. A phoneme is the smallest distinctive sound unit. So this could be like CH together, ch. Does it mean anything? No, not by itself. It has to be put with other phonemes in order to create a word. But it's the smallest distinctive sound unit that we have. And in English, we have around 40 of them. Now, a morpheme, and I think M as in meaning, a morpheme is the smallest unit that carries meaning. So no is a sound unit, and it means no. Un also means no. Non, anti. Okay, all of these words indicate a meaning beyond just the sound. Like, you know that this is a prefix. So if you said non-smoking area, then that means do not smoke, but you don't have to say out the entire sentence, do not smoke. Or anti-imperialist. Okay, you know what that means just by knowing the meaning of the morpheme anti. Okay, so the difference between a phoneme and a morpheme is that a phoneme is just the smallest sound unit, no meaning to it by itself. And then a morpheme is a smallest unit, but it also means something, and it can be a word unto itself. Now, grammar are just language rules. Okay, what is some grammar rules that we have in English? Well, we have subject-verb agreement, right? So there's plural versus singular. We have, what else is there? I just had, oh, the way that we put our nouns and adjectives, we put like red car. It goes adjective before the noun, whereas in Spanish, it would be el coche rojo, which is car red. Oh yeah, the worst rule is trying to figure out when to use who and whom. Like if it has a preposition like to whom, it's whom. If it's a subject, then it's who. That's how I remember. Who is a subject, whom with an M is an object. So here we have noun and then adjective. Okay, it's like, see in this example, these is good. Well, these is plural, is singular. So that breaks one of our grammar rules for subject-verb agreement. A rule that other languages have that English doesn't are gender rules. Okay, do we think cars are male? No. Okay. And it's not just like in terms like, oh, it's gender, female or male. It's just like language rules, right? But in Spanish, coche is male. Therefore, the corresponding adjective has to be conjugated in the male form. Rojo instead of raja. Casa, la casa, house, is feminine. Thus, it's casa roja instead of an O. We don't have those rules in English, right? And even the rules that we do have, we tend to break. Okay, like no I after E except after C, things like that. Basically, English is just 3 different languages in a trench coat. And all of this relates to the study of language, which is linguistics. Which, if you want to go into linguistics in college, you should speak to Madame Wilson because she actually majored in this. So if you're looking for that. Are we good so far? Yeah, English does literally contradict its own rules. It's like we make the rules here, but also we don't. All right, now there's things beyond language, just their basic meaning. I mean, semantics, or the study of meaning, is where we derive meaning not only from morphemes, but from entire words and sentences. And that's essentially what language is. It's what do you mean by this? But you also have pragmatics. These are the practical aspects that are unspoken understandings. Like, for instance, if I said, you good? Depending on how I say that, it could mean different things. It could mean like a question like, you good? Like, are you okay? Do you need help? Or, sorry, I mean, what's good? It's you good? I was trying to think of the different meanings, because if you say what's good, like, are you okay? Versus what's good, like you want to fight. You good? And what's another inflection? It's like, you good. Okay, so you can say you good, question mark, or you good, like you're fine. Okay, so the different tone or inflections that we have can have different meanings. Okay, also with pragmatics, you have like greetings, okay, formal versus informal. You may come up to a friend and say, what's good, but you may not go up to Mr. Baker and be like, what's good? Or to Mr. Monson or to your boss and say, what's good? Okay, so there's formal versus informal. If y'all were referring to me in Spanish, you would use the formal usted, not the informal tú. Okay, so different languages have different rules for formal versus informal. And then some languages even have different tones, like Korean and Japanese and Chinese, okay, that native English speakers can't necessarily hear or differentiate. We're going to talk about that specifically with Hindi. Also with requesting things, okay, or pragmatics of communicating in terms of greeting somebody. Like if I say, how are you? What is the expectation that you respond with? You're good. When I say, oh, how are you? Am I literally asking how you are at that exact moment? Tell me your life story. No. Okay. That's just a nicety. It's just a small talk. You're not supposed to go into like, oh, well, you know, my tire blew out and I'm behind in the bills and my cat keeps having hairballs, like things like that. Okay. Nobody is actually asking because they want to know. They're asking because it is a social nicety. You say, I'm good. How are you? They say good. Or if you want to die inside, you're like living the dream. That's code. Or working hard or hardly working. That's all part of those pragmatics. Syntax. These are rules for sentence structure. Okay, so for our language in English, we do adjective, then noun, subject, then verb. With other languages, they do adjective adjective after the noun. In sign language, they have a completely different sentence structure than in spoken language. I think it's like adjectives and nouns first, and then like the verb at the end. And then versus spelling versus actual words put together. Okay, and syntax is typically what you're going to be tested on the ACT in the English section. Matching up subject and verb agreement, knowing what punctuation to use. Okay, are we good so far? Now, like I was saying before, Language is much more difficult to learn later in life. And in fact, the younger you learn it, the more you can pick up, not only on the language itself, but the different inflections and pragmatics of it. Okay, so like the ability to distinguish between Hindi T sounds, Hindi speaking adults and infants, okay, that have been exposed to it very early in life, even later in life when they're grown up, are going to be able to hear tones and different sounds that other native English speakers wouldn't. But you'll see that this steadily declines as the child gets older, even by a matter of months. So 8 months versus 10 months versus 12 months. Okay, the 10 to 12-month-old, so a 1-year-old, is about the same level. This is supposed to be higher, is about the same level as English speaking adults. So it's very, very difficult to learn a language if you don't start young. Now, does that mean it's impossible? No, but you're much more likely to learn it if it's before age 1 and you've been exposed to it, even within your mother's womb. Okay, you can pick up on different inflections on that particular language that will be your native language. But we all are born to be able to recognize any language. So there are no babies that are born knowing how to speak. Okay, they're literally that blank slate. And whatever they're exposed to within that first year is going to determine what they speak for the rest of their life. Okay, by the time you reach age 6, you've gotten about 80% of the entire language mastered. But when do American schools first introduce you to foreign languages? Middle school. By the time it's middle school, it's too late. Okay, you're not going to be able to retain it as effectively. It needs to start early on in preschool or elementary school if you want to have the best luck with that. Okay, so language acquisition is something that is unique to humans, all right, but also dolphins and some species of monkeys. You do have some evidence, like for instance, some gorillas being able to do sign language. Okay, so we're thinking like this is unique to humans, but we're starting to get some evidence that maybe it's a little bit more complex than we thought. Someone said in the chat, speaking of, I dreamt in Spanish and French last night, and now I remember everything. That's actually one of the signs that you're becoming fluent, is if you start dreaming in the language that you're learning. So that's a really good sign. Newborn children know 0 words, and yet they become fluent by around the age 6 years of age. Okay, so we need to be starting these language classes prior to kindergarten if you really want to have a higher effect. Now, this is something I saw on Twitter years ago, and I thought it was interesting to put in here because, like, Princess Charlotte, who's the child of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Okay, they're talking about how she can speak 2 languages at just 2 years old. Well, yeah, that's common, especially with people of immigrant background. Okay, so again, kind of that gatekeeping of, oh, well, when it's this person that's speaking 2 languages versus someone of immigrant parents, then it's different. Okay, and very impressive just in terms of older adults that are immigrants that come over and they learn different languages of whatever country they immigrated to, and how difficult that is, especially when you think about the English language. Y'all, there are 5 different levels to difficulty in languages. I used to work at the Maxwell Air Force Base Culture and Language Center, and this was like a part of the training that we did. Spanish is on like level 2. But the most difficult languages to learn on level 5 are Mandarin Chinese and English. Okay, so English is one of the most difficult languages to learn. And yet we still have many, many adults who, when they immigrate to the United States, mastering the English language. Okay, so it's a huge accomplishment. Are we good so far? All right. Cognitive universalism is the idea that there are some concepts that are universal across the spectrum, and that's especially true in language. For instance, all languages, whether they're spoken, written, or signed, have nouns and verbs. Now, how we conjugate those verbs may differ, okay, but we do have those basic parts of speech, and language. We have nouns, objects, people, places, or things, and verbs, past, present, future, all of that. Okay, it's called universalism because it's something that's universal, okay, to the concept of language. There are some things that are the same, okay, or universal across the branch of language. For instance, one concept that's universal is the fact that all languages have nouns and verbs. Okay, whether it's Spanish, English, sign language, okay, they have nouns and they have verbs. And so some of those concepts are going to be the same across no matter what language you're speaking or writing or reading or signing. And remember that language isn't just spoken, it's also what you can sign like ASL. Okay, and that influences the develop of language. Where do we put our nouns versus our verbs? Where do we put our adjectives when it comes to our nouns or our adverbs? Where do we place punctuation? Okay, all of that is a part of cognitive universalism. We do have some form of syntax or structure to our language, whether it's written or spoken. Another theory of language under Noam Chomsky states that as humans, we are unique amongst all other animals, amongst all other mammals. We are the only ones that form language in such a complex way that we have. And he believes that that is because we are pre-programmed to be able to understand language. And that pre-programming is this metaphorical language acquisition device. Now, do we know exactly where in the brain this device is located? No, we do not. Okay, this is metaphorical in that he says we imitate or model language that we hear, but also as humans, we are predisposed to learning language, that we have fundamental language rules that are a part of this schema or mental set. Now, does that mean that there are no other animals that communicate? No. Okay, you have gorillas that can communicate with ASL, like the gorilla Coco and her kitten. Okay, so she could like make signs for sadness and things like that. Dolphins communicate with each other. Animals communicate through body language. Okay, but we specifically have these steps to acquire a spoken language. And how do we use this in order to speak? Well, it's not just a random language that we end up speaking. It's not like, okay, I'm born and my language device says I'm going to speak Chinese, right? It's nature plus nurture. It is the predisposition to learn a language, but also the language in our environment. So y'all may remember Jeannie, the case study of the little girl who was rescued from a abusive household where she had been chained up and hadn't learned how to speak, really didn't have any other words other than her own name and the word no. Okay, so the only language that she had been exposed to very briefly was English. And then even after she was out of that situation, she had missed her critical period in development where her language acquisition device would work. Okay, so there's a critical period, a sensitive period, where if you don't use it, you lose it. So we take in the language in our environment and we try to reproduce the sounds and then eventually learn the grammar and the syntax rules for it. Sorry, I've got like a cat hair poking me right in the mouth. Where could that have come from? So all children around the world, and this goes back to universalism, follow the same pattern. They are born not knowing any language, that whole tabula rasa. And then they pick up whatever language or languages to which they are exposed. Okay, because this language acquisition device is very flexible. Whatever language you expose the child to, that's the language that they're going to incorporate into their own native language. And so that's why it makes more sense for you to expose younger children to multiple languages rather than how in the American school system, when do y'all first start learning a foreign language? Okay, some of y'all are like, yeah, pretty young because like my parents did right and I'm like bilingual or trilingual. But my first experience with foreign language was in middle school. And I took Latin of all things, right? So not even like, can't even use it. I'm not going to be a doctor. I pass out at the sight of blood. And then in high school, I switched over to Spanish. So am I fluent in any language other than English? No, I am not. I can make myself understood, but that's about it. I've lost that ability to easily learn a language and become fluent in it. Now, does that mean it's impossible to learn a language after 2 years old? No, you can, but it's going to take a lot more effort and it's not going to come as naturally. So it's easier for you to expose that child to that language at an earlier point within that critical period. And then even if they don't become fluent, they can better sense different tones in the language, like how to pronounce certain things, like a native speaker. Does that make sense so far? All right. Newer theories go beyond the language acquisition device to focus on nurture. So, what are some environmental factors, like the languages that you come into contact with? The use of higher pitched, repetitive sing song voice to talk to infants, that baby voice that I use on cats, but some people use on babies, that you are repetitive. And so you're modeling for them. Like you talk to them and you're like, say, mama. And they have to see your mouth in order to copy that language. You also have theories that focus on the deaf community. Okay, so some infants may have more difficulty with language, or at least the spoken language, because of environmental factors where they may have been born without the ability to hear, or they're born on the spectrum with either autism or Asperger's, and they don't speak for the first few years of their life, or sometimes at all. They may only learn a few words. It depends on where on the spectrum they land and the kind of intervention that they get and when they get that intervention. Okay, so you could see language delay that is either made up for, like you catch up, or you don't catch up, or you convert to using gestures and signs, like with ASL. And now the deaf community does consider itself to be a community with a culture and a language. Okay. Also, learning a second language can be very difficult when it comes to negative transfer versus positive transfer. That was two of your vocabulary terms. Negative transfer is when you're trying to learn something and previous knowledge interferes with that. For instance, if I'm learning Spanish and embarazada, and I see this word, this is a false cognate. It looks like it might be the word embarrassing in English, so I already have that previous knowledge, but I know that it actually means pregnant, okay? And so that would be a negative transfer. But what if I have a true cognate, like familia? Then I have positive transfer because I already have the concept of the word family. This is very, very similar to the concept of the word family in English. Okay, so it's easier for me to pick that up. You also have the issue of overgeneralization of grammar rules. One of the most common grammar rules that I see students mix up, not just people who are speaking it or reading it as a second language, but also native speakers, is the overgeneralization of past tense, notably with ed. Typically in English, if you want to make a verb past tense, you just add an ed to it. Like if you want to do past tense of to walk, you just write walked. And so young children and people who aren't native speakers often continue to overgeneralize, overuse that rule. For instance, how would I do the past tense of to pay? Okay, yes, paid, but how would I spell it? P-A-I-D. Okay, a lot of people spell it like how Nathan spelled in the chat, P-A-Y-E-D, and that is grammatically incorrect. Why? Because English makes no sense. Yeah, you're like, oh, what? We just said add an ED, but it's obvious, right? Yeah, so that is a stem changer, right? And we have a lot of stem changers in English. To fight. Am I supposed to say fighted? Yeah, how do I do past tense? A fight. Fought. This is one that in world history I get all the time. Past tense of to seek. Sought. I have so many people that put seeked. Yeah. It's overgeneralization. If you've never come into contact with it, then it makes sense to say, well, this is generally the rule, and that's a mental set.
But like, you like seek, like to seek out, like just everyday use that word.
Yeah, it's really difficult because like not a lot of people use the word seek. Like we try to like say find, like or I looked for, right? That's what I do in Spanish is if I don't know the word for something, I try to get as close as possible with what I have. Or to buy is bought. We still have stem changers like that in Spanish, like I'm trying to think. I remember I don't know what this word means. Volver, is that to find or to look for? And then you have to change the O to a UE. Okay, so you have stem changes in multiple languages, not just English. Y'all tell me if I'm wrong with that. That looks familiar. Yeah, to return. That's what it is. Volver is to return. That's right. And then, of course, you have the ER versus AR versus IR. Is that it? Yeah. How you would conjugate those words, which is a lot more straightforward than what English does. Okay, so by that overgeneralization, you're entering into mental sets where you're trying to do a shortcut. You're not doing an algorithm, you're doing a heuristic. Typically in English, if I want to make something past tense, I add an ED to it, but that's not going to work out 100% of the time. It'll work out 90% of the time, maybe. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So the ultimate question in psychology, the original chicken and the egg, is nature versus nurture. What influences us the most? Well, the answer is both together. We have nature in the form of our genes designed the mechanisms for language, that whole LAD, our ability to comprehend language. But then in order to speak a language, first we have to experience it. That's the nurture part. If you take a baby and you don't speak to it or let it hear any language, it's not going to have some, random language that it uses as the original language of humans. It has to come into contact with other people speaking that language in order to learn how to speak. Nathan, what does that mean? The egg came first, but it wasn't hatched by a chicken? Would it be an egg from a snake then?
Nah, it's like over time, like through the generations, like genetic mutations made into a chicken, but it wasn't hatched by a chicken. It was hatched like by the chicken's ancestor, kind of.
The dinosaurs.
Yes, I think. I don't know.
They do lay eggs. That's right. Mostly they're leathery though, without a harder shell. And then that evolution of a shell allowed us to come out of the water. I could see it. If you've ever seen a turkey without feathers, it looks like a dinosaur would look. Some of y'all are like about to Google turkey without feathers. There's something else I was gonna say and then I forgot. Oh, have y'all ever thought about like the story of the first humans? Like if you're like believe in the Garden of Eden thing, I always think about how Adam and Eve wouldn't have a belly button.
Wait a second.
Because no umbilical cord.
Wait a second.
You need the umbilical cord if you're born, no belly button. Sometimes, when there's nothing good on the radio, I get stuck with my own thoughts. And and that's what happens. Also, like I was telling my kids about writing DBQs, like you get at least a 40 out of 100 if you just attempt the essay, as long as you're not writing things like, why doesn't Tarzan ever have a beard? Or he has to be relevant,
Wait a second.
Yeah, why doesn't Tarzan have facial hair? See? I'm just telling you, you start thinking too hard. Where would he get a razor? He was raised by gorillas. With a rock? He would have had mad scar tissue. I'm just saying. If he practices carving his face with a rock enough, I would just leave the facial hair. Who is he shaving for?
He didn't like it.
Oh, okay. He didn't shave. He ripped it out of his face, waxing.
No.
I like that explanation better. We're going with that. Yeah,
Maybe
see, you get
take
something
some, like,
sticky and then you just like rip it off.
That's what he did.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
we've established Tarzan likes pain.
Look at the profile picture.
So nature, genes, environment, nurture, put them together, fluency. So the answer to, is it nature or nurture? The answer is always yes. Both. Okay. So it's just yes. How are you today? No. All right. Sam, I always appreciate your reactions to my jokes because they're just like, there's so much. And I'm just like, oh, maybe I am funny. It's the trauma. People like, oh, my trauma made me funny. And then it's like, my trauma is when I lost all the money on the stock market with GameStop. And I was like, that's not trauma. That's little leagues. Have y'all heard about the stonks? Yeah. With GameStop and AMC. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not smart enough to know anything about this. I know, like, you wake up and you go to the Wall Street where they're holding a farmer's market, and then you sell the video game. That's all I know about stocks. I never took econ. All right. You can probably look at my bank account and be like, yeah, no, she definitely never took econ. Linguistic relativity is that our experiences are shaped by language, and our language is shaped by experiences. So cross out this not. Okay. The Sapir-Whorf's hypothesis believes that language determines the way we think. That's linguistic determinism. Language and thought influence each other. For instance, the most famous example of this is the Eskimos who live up north, right? They have allegedly 40 different words for snow. Wet snow, dry snow, white snow, flurry snow, dirty snow, like all of these different words to indicate what type of snow they're talking about, right? Do we have that many words for snow in Alabama? No, we're just like a snowflake, shut everything down. Get your milk and bread sandwiches ready, right? So linguistic determinism is the idea that our thoughts can be influenced by the language that we use. Okay, so for instance, you youngins use a lot of terms like toxic, okay, or lit, or viral. Back in my day, when we had dial-up internet, and I had to type using numbers for texting, I had a flip phone, and let me tell you, you could smash that thing and it would still work. It would still make calls. If someone said, back in my day that something went viral, I wouldn't know what that means. I'd have been like, wait, you mean someone got sick? And I was like, oh, hindsight 2020, yes. But then if you say that today, no one's going to be like, oh, as in like a pandemic. They're going to say, oh, it went viral on the internet. Someone got videotaped calling the cops for something stupid. That's what it means to go viral. Okay, so your idea of what viral means could have a different positive or negative connotation. Like if you say, oh, did you see that cat that went viral? I'm going to think, heck yeah, cats. But if you say, did you hear about the bat that got viral? Then it's like, oh no, the coronavirus. Okay, so your language and your environment shapes your thoughts. For me, before I met y'all, lit just meant you lit something up. Now I know it means cool, okay, or nice. Toxic's still bad. Okay, but I always think of the Britney Spears song when I see toxic, which y'all may not have that connection. I guess, I don't know how. When did she come out with that song? Were y'all even alive?
Everybody knows what
Yeah, Brianne's just like, no, it was a classic. You're like, oh, back when the old music used to be good. And I'm like, excuse me, old?
yeah, toxic.
I was alive when her first album came out. I had posters of her on my wall.
I mean, as you should.
Yeah,
Should.
an icon. All right. Does anyone have any questions about linguistic relativity? Sam, that picture.
Yeah.
All right. Stages of language. We're going to talk about how, and I really want y'all to watch this video. It's so cute, but it's so slow on my internet that I can't get it to work. So I'm going to put it in the chat. The first stage of language is the babbling stage, which is exactly what it sounds like. You babble. Okay, when babies first start to reproduce what language is to them, they can't really get their mouth around the words. Like you try to teach them to say dada or mama, and that's about the extent of what they can do. So usually they just randomly say random sounds, but they use the same cadence. Okay, and they use the same gestures to indicate, are you watching it? To indicate what they're trying to say. So like in this video, it shows the little girl in the babbling stage arguing with her dad. And so he's responding, it's like, who do you think you're talking to? And she's like, ba ba da ba da ba da ba. Like she even does a little hip thing. And he's just like, I don't know who you're talking to like that. I don't care. And she's just like, ah, da, 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 da. And so it's like she's arguing without actually saying any words. And it's adorable. I just hate that our Wi-Fi will not allow me to watch it. Then you move into the one word stage, which is hollow phases. It's exactly what it sounds like. These are very straightforward. Babbling stage makes no sense. They're just imitating. One word stage, they can speak in single words. Okay, so words like go or dog or no. That was one of the first words I ever learned. Tax referral. Maybe tax fraud. Stonks. Okay, that is the one word stage from 12 to 24 months. Does anyone need this slide? All right, then the two word stage. Who knew? This begins around age 2, the terrible twos, and that's when you can start speaking in almost sentences, like they leave out some verbs and some nouns, but they'll say things like want cookie. That's communicating. Who wants the cookie? The kid wants the cookie. It's implied that they're talking about themselves. Or they might say dog bad. So they may confuse where adverbs are supposed to go or adjectives are supposed to go. Like we always put it before the noun in question, but they're trying. They're going to be making some errors, but they can be understood. So this is kind of like when I try to speak Spanish. Then telegraphic speech is an early stage where you can talk in mostly nouns and verbs, missing some of the helping words there, but you can still be understood. So mostly nouns and pronouns with the verbs. Okay, one example that I have of a meme with the babbling stage is I found this one time on Twitter and I was just like, okay, I've got to incorporate that somehow into my language. It's like, yeah, baby, I got it. I know exactly what you mean. So this is the babbling stage. They are attempting to communicate, but it means nothing.
Maybe your version of Oz.
All right, then at 18 months, that's the 1 year. Okay, they start grouping into short sentences, that 2-word stage. By 6 years old, they're fluent in the language. They know about 80% of it. That doesn't know that they know how to use semicolons necessarily, but they know enough to master 80% of the language, and that's considered fluency. Yeah, right, yeah. You know the general, and you can like overgeneralize the grammar rules, but you know enough to be understood.
Is that the complete sentences stage?
Yeah. Like you can have full-on conversations, usually about nothing. Because if you've ever heard a child try to tell a story, you're just like, I wish I could kick you to make you stop talking. Because they'll just be like, and then my friend, he took out his sandwich from his box. And then after that, he took out his potato chips. And then he got his Capri Sun. And you know how I like Capri Suns. And it's just like, stop talking to me. So I try not to talk to small children. Y'all are fine. Okay, but small children, I'm just like, I should be intimidating or scary to them. Are we good so far?
Yeah.
Some of y'all are like, I am intimidated by it.
What's the telegraphic speech again?
Telegraphic is when you can understand what they're saying, but they're just putting together like really short sentences. So it's not at this age at 6 years. Okay, that's the earlier stage, around 2 years old. Are we good so far? All right, here's a good summary of language development in terms of months. 12 months is 1 year. Please don't be those parents that says like, oh, they're 28 months old. Stop making me do math against my will. Like, it's a crime. Just tell me how old they are in years, like a normal person.
After they hit 12 months, stop.
Yeah, like just be like, I don't care if they're 13, 1 year old, 1 year old. They're too young to drive, too young to drink. That's what I need from this conversation. Okay, 24 months. That's 2 years. And then 2 plus. Okay, so we have the babbling, the 1 word, the 2 word, that's supposed to say word, not world. And then it becomes complete sentences and you can kind of sort of hold a conversation. I think this is around the age that you tell them about Santa Claus not being real.
My
Is
mom
that-
never kept it. Like, she was just like straight up Santa Claus is not real.
Yeah.
She thinks it's like bad because you're lying to your kids.
Yeah, you're lying to your kids and you don't want them to like, if you get them an Xbox, you better be like, yeah, that came from me. Santa's the one who got you the pack of socks and underwear. That's what Santa got you. That's what Santa does.
More.
Santa
Santa got you.
Yeah. No, my parents just straight up told me, like, because they're the same thing, like, I don't want to lie to my kids, because apparently my father believed in Santa Claus up until a ridiculous age because he thought his mother would never lie to him. And so they just straight up told me, like, yeah, Santa is a historical figure, Saint Nick, and he's dead. And so all I got from that was Santa is dead. Like real like Nietzsche style, like God is dead and we killed him. All right. With language, learning a new language gets harder with age. Here's a graph because I know how y'all love data. A native speaker, okay, can typically get around 95% correct on a grammar test. Then if someone's learned it by their toddler years, they're still in that same category. But as you get older, in a foreign language, it gets much more difficult to do. So why on earth are we giving y'all grammar tests in Spanish and German and all that? Because we love punishment. All right, if we wanted you to learn a foreign language, then we would start introducing it to you here, not here in middle school and here in high school. Okay, and that's why in European countries, people tend to be multilingual. Whereas in America, in the United States specifically, they don't tend to be multilingual. Okay, because we have such an emphasis on English. Whereas in Europe, you may learn French and English and whatever the native language in the area is. Or if you're in a military family, you may have more experiences with foreign languages if you've ever been stationed overseas. Okay, especially if you're like born on a foreign military base. So even if you don't learn the language, if you're born in Germany, right, and you're around a lot of people who speak German, you're more likely to recognize the different tones and the pronunciations and be able to get that language even more easily, even as you get older. Yes, baby. You were made in Japan? Assembled. Sam's like, I got it. All right, now to talk about, and this the last 2 slides, y'all, we're almost there. Now to talk about the parts of the brain involved in language. That's going to be the frontal lobe, okay, the decision-making part of your brain. Broca's area deals with speaking. How do I remember that? I use semantic processing. Okay, not just maintenance rehearsal, but I use meaning for it. Okay, so boca is Spanish for the word mouth, and the mouth is used for speaking. So do y'all see how I tie that meaning together for rehearsal? Okay, and so whenever I see Broca's area, I know that it deals with the mouth, the production of speech. Now, Broca's aphasia That's when you have damage to Broca's area. With this, the muscles that control your mouth aren't fully within your control, and so you may stutter or mispronounce things. Okay, so words become mispronounced or left out entirely. You can still understand what people say to you. It's just the words coming out of your mouth may not always make sense, but you can still comprehend language. That's different with the other area of the brain concerned with language. Which area is that? The Wernicke. Okay, good. And it's a written test. If you want to pronounce it Wernicke, that's fine. Wernick. Okay, the German pronunciation is Wernicke. Okay, so Wernicke's area deals with comprehension, not with speech. So with Wernicke's aphasia, okay, you can speak clearly, but it doesn't make sense. You use the wrong words. You can enunciate, and they can tell exactly what you said. It's just it's difficult to comprehend. And you also have difficulty understanding what people are saying to you. Which my response to that is always just to nod and say yes. And I don't ask people to repeat themselves like the third time. If I have to say like, excuse me, can you say that again a third time? I'm just like, okay, I guess I don't need to know. Yeah, it must not be important.